Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and while I've been working on numerous topics involving some bad faith actors in terms of game developers, I found myself in a discussion earlier today that warranted my covering it as it was firmly entrenched within the terms of US copyright law and the DMCA in regards to another YouTube gaming channel potentially being a bad faith actor. Specifically, how a fellow games YouTuber saw fit to issue what appeared to be legal threats over use of his content, misrepresentation, and complete misunderstanding of how copyright law and the DMCA actually work, and also how reaction videos, including this specific YouTuber, get it all wrong. All the while, this YouTuber seems to not even be adhering to fair use standards himself. The reason for this is because when people get things this wrong, I feel it would be beneficial to other gaming channels and to other fellow YouTubers in general to discuss this specific topic in the hopes that others not continue to fall prey to the same common misconceptions and failings. Now, as you all know, I am not an intellectual property attorney, nor do I claim to be. I'm merely a mook with a mic expressing my own opinions on such matters. So do me a favor, if you find this video to be worthwhile or beneficial or even a little entertaining, consider subscribing, setting notifications, and maybe even hitting the like button. That said, let's get started. Now, all of this came about recently in regards to Reforge Gaming. Now, Reforge Gaming is a games YouTuber with a little over 30,000 subscribers whose content appears to be primarily focused on quote-unquote reacting to gaming news articles and also members-only live streams. And we'll be circling back to that reaction-style content in a little bit. And recently, Reforge Gaming posted onto Twitter what appeared to be legal threats in regards to his content, which, although extremely mild in nature, are still legal threats, not to mention completely and utterly hypocritical in nature. I did have some interactions with Reforge Gaming regarding this, along with fellow YouTuber Mischief, where the end result saw Reforge Gaming delete the original tweets, all of his responses to me, and block both me and Mischief from social media. In and of itself, not really anything to get worked up over or to even warrant a video, but I do say that more so that you, the viewer, can be aware that his statements have since been removed. Now, his original statement was as follows: "Folks are going to force my hand. Hate watching to the point you earn a gifted membership and then posting, sharing, or reacting to members-only content is a copyright violation. Members-only content does not fall under fair use. I fully support fair use of my public content." And that right there was in actuality a legal threat by his stating that people were going to force his hand. And by this, one can safely make an assumption that he means to issue DMCA takedowns over others making use of his content, which he then follows up by completely failing to understand what constitutes copyright infringement and what doesn't. Now, what he did get right here is that the posting or sharing of someone else's content that has been paywalled, essentially removing it from that paywall for others to view unedited, would absolutely be a violation of his copyright in two different ways, and he would be well within his legal as well as ethical right to see that infringing content removed. What he got wrong there was where he stated members-only content does not fall under fair use. Now, he followed up that statement by responding to another person where he says, "Paid-for content does not fall under fair use. If you pay for classes or content on Patreon or any other site, you can't react to it. It's not publicly viewable content and therefore does not fall under fair use." And that statement there is just so completely wrong that it is honestly a bit laughable. Although unsurprising considering this creator fails to conform to fair use himself. Paid-for content does not fall under fair use. What he's speaking about there is obviously paywalled content. Now, paywalled content is still considered to be publicly viewable. In terms of legality, the closest thing he could be referring to would be the right of first publication. However, paywalled content is still published content. It is publicly available, merely that the public must shell out some money to be able to gain access to that content. This is something that many news sites have done for years and I suspect has partly become so popular with text-based publications due to ad blockers. However, as I said, paywalled published content is still published content and fair use still very much applies. In fact, the closest thing I could find in regards to him even potentially having a case here would be in regards to his first statement where he said, "Hate watching to the point you earn a gifted membership and then posting, sharing, or reacting to members-only content is a copyright violation." Now, it is true that if someone were to bypass, circumvent, or disable a paywall in order to gain access to content, that would absolutely be a violation of copyright. Full stop. Do not pass go, do not collect fair use. The specific component of the DMCA regarding this is contained within 17 U.S. Code subsection 1201, Circumvention of Copyright Protected Systems, where it reads, "No person shall circumvent a technological measure that effectively controls access to a work protected under this title." Now, back in 2015, Teresa M. Trousseau wrote a brief article in the New York Law Review discussing that exact topic and showcased the two leading interpretations of the DMCA in that regard. But one thing is made clear where she states the Digital Millennium Copyright Act prohibits circumventing an effective technological means of control that restricts access to a copyrighted work. She then goes on to discuss the infringement nexus interpretation, which means that circumvention itself must be accompanied by traditional copyright infringement to constitute or prove a violation occurred, and then the access right interpretation, which takes the statement of the DMCA literally. She then goes on to conclude that the access right, or the literal interpretation, is the one that was intended by Congress when the DMCA was enacted. And Teresa M. Trousseau is not a law student writing that article. She is a litigator for Friedman and Tadelman LLP, specializing in business litigation, intellectual property law, entertainment, and real estate. However, the last time I checked, quote, hate watching to the point you earn a gifted membership is not bypassing, disabling, or defeating a means of content protection. It's merely gaming the system so that someone else pays for your access through that paywall. So Reforge Gaming really doesn't have a leg to stand on in that regard. And I quote tweeted him making a similar statement on Twitter where it appears that he then decided to move the goalpost yet again, and yet he still got it wrong. And big thanks to the Twitter user VAR for snipping that statement where I had not before Reforge Gaming had decided to delete the statement and block me. Reforge Gaming said, "It's a violation of YouTube terms of service, but okay." Which we were not talking about YouTube terms of service at all. Even on Twitter, the only thing being discussed was copyright law and the DMCA, along with his threats of making use of DMCA takedowns for people quote-unquote reacting to content of his that he had paywalled, where he outright states that fair use does not apply when it absolutely would. But I decided I wasn't just going to accept his statement of it being a terms of service violation for YouTube at face value, especially considering how completely wrong about everything this person has been up to this point. So I went back to the YouTube terms of service, and the only thing I could find regarding his statement that it would be a TOS violation was this bit where it says, "Taking someone else's content, making minimal changes, and calling it your own original work would be a violation of this guideline. This policy applies even if you have permission from the original creator." Reused content is separate from YouTube's copyright enforcement, which means it's not based on copyright, permission, or fair use. This guideline means sometimes you may not get claims against your content, but your channel may still violate our reused content guidelines. Nowhere did I find anything regarding paywalled content in that regard, merely that reused content is against YouTube terms of service even if you have the original creator's permission. And I remember when this provision was added to the YouTube terms of service years ago. That specific segment was originally added to the terms of service in order to allow YouTube a means to get a handle on people who would create channels on YouTube and re-upload other people's content in order to soak up ad revenue so they would not have to wait for DMCA takedowns to be filed for people that engaged in that behavior. This was before the monetization requirements YouTube put into place in order to continue to further combat that activity and stamp down on it as well, by removing the monetary incentivization for people doing that. So no, Reforge Gaming, it is not against YouTube terms of service to make use of someone's paywalled content as long as that content does also not run afoul of YouTube's harassment and cyberbullying policy, and so long as it conforms to fair use. So you, Reforge Gaming, have no right to issue spurious DMCA strikes over people using your paywalled content as long as they adhere to fair use. And even if it were a terms of service violation, then you would have to report that action to YouTube. The DMCA takedown is you starting the process of legal action under penalty of perjury. The DMCA takedown process is in regards to copyright violation and not terms of service violation. If you file a DMCA takedown of a video because it is a YouTube TOS violation, they could turn right around and sue you for that and would likely win. Apparently, right before he blocked me, Reforge Media made one additional statement, which thankfully at least part of that statement was grabbed by fellow YouTuber Warrior Dan, where Reforge Media states, "I'm not trying to shift the goalpost," which I'm pretty sure this was in response to my replying to Mischief with the statement, "Holy goalpost shifting, Batman." "I'm not trying to shift the goalposts. It was my understanding that paid-for content being reacted to violates my copyright as it hurts my ability to sell memberships. That is a requirement of fair use, that it not harm my ability to make money." Which, no. As long as those reaction videos conform to fair use, then it is not a violation of your copyright. Now, harming your ability to make money is one of the factors of fair use, but it is only a single factor, and fair use is determined specifically by 4 separate factors which must be considered in totality, in conjunction with each other. But merely decreasing your chances of making money, hell, if that were the only determining factor, anytime someone posts something about you or your YouTube channel that you don't like, you could claim that that would harm your ability to make money. If that were the case, every negative review of a video game would be in violation of their copyright because it hindered their potential sales. Every negative critique of anything would be a violation of copyright were that to be the case. And if Reforge Gaming were claiming to be a games critic, I would rake him over the coals and berate him every which way imaginable for his complete and utter lack of critical thought, not to mention being utterly devoid of intellect here. But then again, what more can one expect from such a person who produces react videos that don't even conform to fair use themselves? So let's go through that a bit, shall we? Anyone who has watched my channel for long enough already knows full well about the 4 factors of fair use, and how people with half a brain or less tend to completely misinterpret and make assumptions about what constitutes fair use to begin with. Now, normally, we see that assumption with content creators consistently follows along with the transformative element, completely ignoring all other factors, although Big Brain Reforge Gaming has decided to go a different route and focus on his precious paywall. So what are the 4 factors anyways? Well, they are as follows. The first is transformative, along with the purpose and the character of use. And Stanford University lists this as having 2 primary questions associated with it. Has the material you have taken from the original work been transformed by adding new expression or meaning? Was value added to the original by creating new information, new aesthetics, new insights, and understandings? Now, the second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work. Is this factual or fictional? Is it a published work or is it unpublished? The third factor is the amount and substantiality of the portion taken. How much of the original work did you use? And Stanford lists within this the very important question, does it take the heart of the original? And then the fourth factor is the effect of the use upon the potential market, and this is important in this case. This is not simply depriving someone with potential income, such as a negative review, but more, can this serve as a market replacement for the original? And then what Stanford lists as a fifth factor, are you good or bad? Which, in the court of law, this is more in terms of morality and ethics than anything else, and the judge or the jury's sense of right and wrong. This is the X factor, or the human factor, that can very easily come into play, even though there is no legal framework surrounding it. But that is in terms of litigation, so we're just going to stick to the four factors here. Now, I did take a look through some of Reforge Gaming's videos, and they all follow the exact same format. He opens with a couple of minutes of dialogue, reads through a news article verbatim, interspersing at points with whether or not he agrees with the statement made within the article, and then closes with another minute, maybe 2 minutes of additional thoughts. It is lowbrow, lazy, easy to create content that is a hallmark of reaction channels everywhere, and is why I regard most reaction channels as being a blight on the industry. Before this, we're looking at the video, Does Final Fantasy XVI Even Want to Be a Game? Which shows that, yet again, this is another one of those channels where every video title is a question, never an answer. Although no surprise, the title of the video is also a direct ripoff of the article he's stealing from. The article is from thegamer.com's article of the same name, written by Stacey Henley and published a week ago. So as I look at this video in its entirety, and we consider the first factor, is it transformative? Has it added deeper insight, expression, or meaning? Well, we gain the insight that he disagrees with the article in the most minimalistic way possible. Was value added by creating new information, new aesthetics, new insights, and understanding? Again, possibly, but if so, only in the most minimal way possible. He does share the context that this article is written by someone who most likely only played the demo or the prologue, which the demo is the prologue for the game, which in terms of Final Fantasy is always very story-laden in nature. It sets the tone and the stage for the game that follows, and Square Enix have always been very light on gameplay within their prologues. But is it enough of a transformation? Honestly, it is so completely borderline that I would have to defer to an attorney or a judge in this matter, but I'm leaning towards it possibly being transformative, but it is so on the fence that it's unbelievably narrow. And the reason I say this is I see nothing of value being added here from an objective standpoint that is significant. And this is just taking a look at transformative as a single rule, not as an amalgamation with the other four factors, which when you talk to a judge or you bring something like this before a judge, the judge will be looking at this as part of an amalgamation of the four factors. And when you look at it under that lens, the transformative aspect starts to fall away a bit. So let's take a look at the second factor, the nature of the copyrighted work. Now this one does actually lean in Reforge Gaming's favor. This is a news article and is not a fictional work, and it is quite clearly a published work. However, this is not a factual work, it is an opinion article, but this being the case, Reforge Gaming is likely to not run afoul of this factor, and it would weigh in his favor. Then we have the third factor, the amount and substantiality of the portion taken. And as is true with every one of his reaction videos, he takes 100% of the article. Now, the rule with fair use is less is more. There are times when using 100% of a copyrighted work is necessary in terms of critique, when there's just so many things that need to be broken up or discussed that each and every portion is pulled out and scrutinized heavily. But that is not what is happening within this video and the other videos on this person's channel like it. This factor heavily weighs against Reforge Gaming here, as his minimalist agree-disagree provides insufficient justification for making use of every single last word written in the article and him reading it out verbatim. And finally, we have the fourth factor, the effect of the use on the potential market. Does this serve as a market replacement for the original? Absolutely. Does it fix the article in a new or different medium while doing so? Also yes. 100% without a doubt to both questions. This video would also absolutely create competition for the original work within the medium of YouTube videos. This factor also weighs heavily against Reforge Gaming here. So, taken individually, the four factors weigh in at 2 against, 1 for, and 1 extremely borderline. However, when weighing all factors as a whole, which is what any judge would do, as I said, this style of content and how it is delivered does not at all conform to fair use, and if thegamer.com were so inclined, they would have grounds to file a DMCA strike against Reforge Gaming's video. In fact, as this is his standard format, every news agency out there would have a case for filing takedowns against his coverage of their content and pursue it in court if they chose to, and his chances of coming out on top definitely would not look good. And it is just hilarious that this person who fails to conform to fair use would be so completely inept as to threaten DMCA takedowns regardless of fair use considerations for others using his content because of his precious paywall. It's a bit like...
excuse me? Mr. Kettle, Mr. Pot called. He says you're black!
What? It's a turn of phrase. It has nothing to do with race.
So my advice to channels like Reforge would be to actually learn how to conform to fair use and absolutely educate yourself about the laws that you want to try and throw around, because someone might cause what would likely be an insignificant impact to your income, especially since those are the same laws you seem to ignore on your own channel when you are making content. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.